I call to make his debut at the dispatch box, Minister Dean Russell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I just begin with sharing my condolences with the family and friends of Sir David Amess. He is deeply missed in this place. In fact, the very last speech I gave on the backbenches was in the Sir David Amess debate, and from the time that I knew him, he was a dear friend, and I know he is deeply missed. And it is also a pleasure to follow the Honourable Member for Feltham and Heston. She's been incredibly kind in her engagement over the past week, and I know when we met, incredibly helpful in terms of understanding her views on this bill. I want to thank colleagues on both sides of the House, in fact, who have spoken in this important debate for their well-considered and eloquent contributions on such an important issue, and for the broad support of the objectives of this bill, which I mention in terms of being grateful, actually, of the fact that most of the agreement is that they enjoy the bill and they think it's the right thing, but it's more the stuff that isn't in it that's been debated, which is always useful. I often think, actually, when sitting on the backbenches listening to the opposition, and this isn't a criticism, but often the argument is to go faster and further, and often I think that's a great way to pitch to be a personal trainer in the future. So there's careers for the future for the opposition moving forward. But importantly, I think in this particular instance, I understand where those arguments are coming from, and I will attempt to address them as I go through this. I'll aim to respond to as many points as I can made by honourable and right honourable members, given the time available. And first, I want to remind the House of what this bill will achieve and what signal it sends across the UK and around the world. As set out by my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, earlier, the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Bill will bear down on kleptocrats, criminals and terrorists who abuse our open economy, and it will strengthen the UK's reputation as a place where legitimate business can thrive whilst driving dirty money out of the UK. This historic bill contains a significant and coherent package of measures to help us crack down on economic crime and the abuse of the UK's corporate structures. As the House has noted today, that includes the most significant reform to the UK's company registration framework in 170 years. I think most governments have gone over that time, so I think it's good that this is now happening now. But the importance and impact of these changes should not be underestimated. Madam Deputy Speaker, this bill will help tackle economic crime, including fraud and money laundering, by delivering greater protections for consumers and businesses. It will support our national security by making it harder for kleptocrats, criminals and terrorists to abuse our open economy. And it will support enterprise by enabling Companies House to deliver a better service for over 4 million UK companies, supporting business transactions and lending decisions across our economy. I'm sure that everyone in this chamber will agree that we must maintain the UK's status as one of the world's largest and most open economies, and that London continues as one of the world's most attractive destinations for overseas investors, but crucially, investors of the right kind. I would like to thank the Right Honourable Member for Barking and my honourable friend, the Member for Thirsk and Moulton, for spearheading cross-party collaboration on these important issues through the all-party parliamentary groups that they chair, and for their learned contributions to today's debate. I know, and I've sat in this chamber many times hearing them talk about these issues before, and their wisdom is deep and is heard loudly. I look forward to working with you as this bill progresses. Before I turn to the issues members have raised, though, let me first share my sadness at the tragic deaths referenced by my honourable friend, the Member for Thirsk and Moulton. These are tragic examples of just why it's so important to crack down on criminal organised crime groups and their business models. You know, at the heart of this is about real people, children, families, and what we have to do is put this in place to protect them, because our citizens have to come first. I'm going to turn now to responding as best I can to the comments and the questions raised in the House. I'll start with verification around Companies House and verification by agents. I welcome the broad interest across the House into the Companies House reforms, including on identity verification. I can confirm the identity verification requirements will apply to all new and existing company directors, people with significant control, and those delivering documents to the registrar. The Honourable Member for Glasgow Central and the Right Honourable Member for Walsall South asked about identity verification checks undertaken by authorised corporate service providers. I can confirm that these checks will achieve the same level of assurance of the stated identity as those undertaken through the direct verification route and in line with the cross-government identity proofing network. Agents will need to confirm that they are supervised by a body that is subject to UK's anti-money laundering regime and register with Companies House before they are allowed to form companies or registrable partnerships or to file on their behalf. Under anti-money laundering regulations, all agents are required to retain records, and the registrar can request further information on identity verification checks if necessary. The agent will be committing an offence if they fail to carry out ID checks, and new powers will enable the registrar to suspend and deauthorise an authorised corporate service provider. I can also reassure the Right Honourable friend, a member, although I consider her a friend, for Walsall South, that the measures in the bill will help the registrar remove fraudulent information, including the addresses of innocent people, without burdening those people with so much process. And I think what we've heard across the House is many of the issues that have been raised will be solved with this bill about the challenges for false businesses being put onto the registrar and it not being able to do anything to date. She also asked about the process for identity verification. We set out that in the white paper earlier in the year, and operational design work still continues. I also note her concerns about the newly implemented register of overseas entities, and it's early days for that register, but I will look forward and look into the quality of the filings being made.
The explanation he's giving. I just wanted to be absolutely clear. Is the verification scheme through the existing UK Government Verify that is used for passports and driving licences and things of that kind, or is it a separate new scheme that's being built here?
Thank you for your question. I'll come back to you on that. I'll gladly respond in writing so you've got the full details. I'm going to move now on to Companies House fees and funding. A number of honourable members from across the House, including the Honourable Member for Stretford and Ermston and the Honourable Member for the Rhondda, who isn't in his place now, but I'm sure would be intervening right now if it had been, have asked if Companies House will be properly resourced for its new role. Investment in new capabilities at Companies House is currently underway. Companies House was allocated £63 million across the spending review period to implement its transformation programme. This will include improvement of systems to detect suspicious activity. The Government is reviewing funding arrangements in the context of the reforms and is committed to ensuring that Companies House is fully resourced to perform its new role and functions. The Honourable Member for Glasgow Central also asked if the bill will raise Companies House fees. The bill does give the Government more flexibility to do so, broadening the range of functions that can be funded through the Companies House fees. In particular, it enables us to use fees to cover the cost of investigative and enforcement activities. But to maintain flexibility, we will not be setting the level of the fees through this bill. The level of fees will continue to be set via regulations and will be subject to future parliamentary scrutiny and approval. I would just note on that we have to get the balance right here, though, because we don't want to put off entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and business people who want to set up a new business. And I think the threshold needs to be really thrashed out and done in the right way. But that will come. That will come. Absolutely.
I understand the point he's making, but it seems to be very incongruous that the government departments, if it's, for example, through the visa system, make people pay through the nose way over and above what it actually costs to produce it, but yet Companies House is charging people very little.
I thank the member for her comments. What I would say is that this is something to come and to be looked at. So the flexibility is going to be there for that, should it happen. We're not setting the fee right now. I think that's a fair thing to do and to say. The Honourable Member for the Rhondda and the Right Honourable Member for Barking asked about the Government's response on asset freezing and seizing. The Government responds to wholeheartedly support the people of Ukraine, and we know that from across the House. And it's so wonderful to hear we had members in the gallery today. And we understand why we would want to take ill-gotten funds and use them to support Ukraine in rebuilding their country. The UK, along with other countries, is examining further options to seize assets from sanctioned oligarchs and grappling with an array of complex issues. His Majesty's government, aim is to support the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. This is a novel and exploratory area with extremely complex legal and operational considerations. We are not aware that any other country to date has yet identified a definitive solution, despite commonality of policy intent, but I'm always keen to continue conversations to hear more from my learned friends. The government is continuing to work at pace to explore all options and will continue to engage with international partners, civil society and others on this topic. I would also like to pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for East Hampshire. He has worked so hard on this over such a long period of time. His involvement in today's debate and for everything he has done to progress these reforms during his time as Security Minister is well recognised and very much appreciated. I know my honourable friend, the current Security Minister, would like to add his thanks to mine as well. My right honourable friend stressed that reforms on how payments are made are important to help identify and stop suspicious payments. I value his insights significantly. Many banks already delay and refuse payments where they suspect fraud. The government, financial regulators and industry are working together to ensure that banks can intervene where necessary. The government and the FCA are engaging with the payments industry to understand what might support banks to take a more consistent risk-based approach to payments and prevent payment fraud. The government will keep under review whether legislation is required to support a risk-based approach to banks. I'm now going to turn on to the topic that came up many times, which was whistleblowing, and it's been something that I know colleagues have asked me about over the past few weeks. I'm very grateful to the constructive comments provided by my right honourable friend, the member for Weston-super-Mare, my honourable friend, the member for Cheadle, and their concerns around the framework protecting whistleblowers, and for their ongoing constructive dialogue on this important issue. I know that they are well known for their views on this, and I know that they do incredible work to lobby government and others on this point. An effective whistleblowing framework is an important aspect of the UK's ability to tackle corruption and all forms of economic crime and illicit finance. Over recent weeks, I have noted with interest the views on the whistleblowing framework and the proposals for reforms put forward by members of this House and the whistleblowing interest groups. I look forward to continuing these conversations. The government remains committed to reviewing the whistleblowing framework, and it's only right that we take the time to do a proper review before considering legislative change. My officials are working on these proposals for the scope and timing of such a review. This work is complex, though, and will proceed on a longer time frame than the bill. Therefore, the bill does not include measures on whistleblowing. However, we remain committed to discussion with all interested parties and parliamentarians as we progress this work, and greatly appreciate the ongoing engagement on this important topic. Of course, I will give way.
Generosity in giving way. Is he able, because I'm afraid his answer there largely parallels a letter he's already written to me, which was notably devoid of dates. Is he able to give the House any indication about when he's going to be able to come forward, either with a fully developed plan and timetable attached, or alternatively just for the four much smaller elements that I mentioned in my speech, which would go an awfully long way to reducing the need for immediate action while he has a longer think about some of the broader, more complicated issues. But without those four immediate issues, we're letting the best be the enemy of the good.
I thank my right honourable friend for his comments. I appreciate it. You would love me to give a date right now, and not you, sorry, Madam Deputy Speaker, but to give a date. I can't do that right now, but I promise that I will continue the engagement and the discussion, and have spoken to officials many times about this over the past 2 weeks. So I would like to continue to meet and have conversations on that front. I think the key thing is that there's a willingness there and there's a framework already being discussed. It's about how and when, as you say. Why is the government not legislating for corporate criminal liability was a topic that came up throughout the debate. And Madam Deputy Speaker, I know that my honourable friend, the member for Thirsk and Moulton, my right honourable member for Barking and right honourable friend, the member for Weston-super-Mare, have raised concerns about prosecution of corporate bodies for economic crime. I thank them for their work in this area. As several members have referenced, the government has taken steps to establish the case for change. We commissioned the Law Commission in 2020 to undertake a detailed review of how the legislative system could be improved to appropriately capture and punish criminal offences committed by corporations, with a particular focus on economic crime. The Law Commission, as was mentioned in the House earlier, published this paper on the 10th of June in 2022, just a few months ago, with the two strongest options being either reform of the identification doctrine and the creation of a new criminal offence of corporate criminal liability for fraud, also known as failure to prevent fraud. The government is carefully assessing the options presented and is committed to working quickly to reform criminal corporate liability. I'll move on to a final few points now. First is to reference comments by the Honourable Member for Glasgow Central, who clearly mentioned a lot of things in her speech, so I want to make sure I'm covering them as best that I can, and also Member for Oxford West. This relates to the reforms and whether they apply to limited partnerships, including Scottish limited partnerships. In response to the questions raised by the honourable members, I'd just like to reiterate that the reforms to limited partnerships will apply to all forms of limited partnership, including Scottish limited partnerships. The bill will tighten registration requirements, require limited partnerships to demonstrate a firmer connection to the UK. They will increase requirements and enable the registrar to deregister from the registered limited partnerships which are dissolved, which are no longer carrying on business. I also now want to move on to questions about SLAP, or the Strategic Litigation Against Public Participation points that were made earlier. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Government is committed to protecting free speech, and we often have debates in this place about the importance of that, and of course the rule of law, cornerstones of our democracy. SLAPs are an abuse of the legal system, involving the use of legal threats and litigation to silence journalists, campaigners and public bodies who investigate wrongdoing in public interest. It is utterly wrong and should not happen. The invasion of Ukraine heightened concerns about oligarchs abusing these laws and seeking to shut down reporting on their corruption or economic crime. The Government published a call for evidence on SLAPs earlier this year to build a robust basis for reform. The Ministry of Justice ran a series of roundtable events with key stakeholders, including campaigning journalists, claimant and defendant lawyers, media groups and civil society organisations. The Government's response to the call for evidence was published on the 20th of July 2022, and the Government is currently exploring opportunities to legislate to introduce a new early dismissal mechanism in SLAPs cases, plus a targeted cost protection regime via secondary legislation. Finally, I'll just add a couple of points which hopefully will conclude the key points that were raised today. I know there were many. I should just note that this is how big the folder was of the original points I was going to make. So you'll be glad that we're not waiting until the committee to finish. So.
Mike, note that he does actually have 1 hour and 1 minute left. Which is easy for me to say as Mr. Deputy Speaker is about to take the chair. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In that case, shall I start my new speech? I will not do so because I'm conscious for members that have been incredibly gracious in their speaking and in their speeches, and even more gracious in listening to me in mine. So I will do my best to finish the last few points so that the adjournment debate can begin. Several members have raised. You get weekends, I can assure you that's. I don't need to legislate for that. Several members have raised concerns about the supervisory regime, including the Honourable Member for Hammersmith and Shepherd's Bush earlier. And with regards to that, how does the supervisory regime for professional enablers work, and is it sufficiently robust? The UK's anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing supervisory schemes are comprehensive in their regulation and supervision of firms most at risk from money laundering and terrorist financing. In December 2018, the Financial Action Task Force, there's lots of acronyms in this, so I'm going to say the full words rather than FATF and AML and all the rest, for anyone who's watching who isn't as understanding of the details. The global standard setter for those those organisations recognise that the UK's regime is one of the strongest of over 100 countries assessed by the Financial Action Task Force. and its regional bodies to date. In 2018, the Government established the Office for Professional Body Anti-Money Laundering Supervision, or OPBAS, to provide a greater degree of oversight and promote cooperation between the 22 professional body supervisors. OPBAS, or the Office for Professional Body Anti-Money Laundering Supervision, has driven significant improvements in the supervision by PBSs, and in 2019 only 9% of PBSs fully applied a risk-based approach. This has risen to 86% by 2020. It has also developed platforms like the Intelligence Sharing Expert Working Groups to facilitate greater information and intelligence sharing. There will still be work to be done in ensuring consistency of approach and to improve information and intelligence sharing, as identified in the recent post-implementation review of the OPBAS regulations and the recent OPBAS report. So, we come to conclusions. I just want to add my final remarks. Again, did you have a...
I thank the Minister for giving way and recognise that he has made a huge kind of set of comments in relation to the issues that have been raised. But I just want to pick him up on one point in relation to the Financial Action Task Force and the comments that he's raised. And he's right that in some areas we may be ahead, but the Financial Action Task Force and the IMF has also highlighted that more needs to be done, including by the Financial Conduct Authority, to expand supervision as well. So I just hope that he will be able to sort of pick some of that up and make sure that we don't sort of think that we've gone far enough. You know, there's a lot further to go for confidence in the regime.
I thank the honourable member for her comments, and I do note those, and I will look into that further and follow up if there's further respondents that's required to give you more detail. In terms of finalising my speech, just a few final remarks. I just want to say thank you again to all of those across the House who spoke. If I didn't mention you, I apologise. If I did, I hope I covered your responses as best I can. I want to collaborate, I want to listen, and I think it's important as parliamentarians that we work together as best we can. And it's been great in this House today to see the best of it. I think when we debate based on knowledge, on experience, and on the ability to work together, that's when we get the best legislation, and it's when we get the best outcome. So I want to thank all of you for that. So to conclude, thank you all. I look forward, based on the support that's been pledged today, to work with you all in the committee stage. I think we've had an excellent and informative debate, and so I look forward to discussing it further in committee, and I now commend it to the House. Thank you.
The question is that the bill be now read a second time. As many of that can say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Congratulations, Minister, on your first outing. Programme motion to be moved.